What is going on, everybody? It's GFUEL, you guys, bringing you the best controller settings, whether you play controller on PC or on console. Luckily for us, Fortnite has made it where controller players are pretty much on the same playing field as like mouse and keyboard players. But since so many people use scuff controllers now, which allow you to have more buttons to work with, pretty much the only difference between mouse and keyboard and controllers, one you use analog sticks to aim, and the other one you use a mouse. But since Fortnite has bloom and a lot of the decision making actually means more than just pure aim, it allows controller players to be on like almost an equal playing field, in my opinion. And we've seen that through like a lot of the Fortnite events, whether it be like the skirmishes, the summer, fall skirmish, and the winter royale. I feel like even in the winter royale, which is the most recent competition, there's been way more controller players than usual, and I would say that's for a couple reasons. Number one, obviously Fortnite has put into the game like settings that allow us to get to that sort of level with like the build immediately, builder pro, and the custom keybinds or the custom controller bind, which allowed the players to like cleverly remap the controller to give us the most control over our character in game. So huge shout out to Epic Games for, you know, getting us almost on that same level, definitely giving us a lot of attention. Like huge props to them because they're the ones that honestly made this possible. Number two reason why we've seen a lot more people make it in is because a lot of controller players or a lot of console players are starting to switch over to PC and use a controller. And for most people, you might be thinking like, why would they do that? It's kind of stupid, or like it doesn't really make sense. Well, on PC, if you guys haven't played it yet, even whether it be mouse, keyboard, or controller, you'll know that the game just runs way smoother. I would say on console you probably get between 50 to 60 frames, obviously depending what's going on in the game and stuff like that. It might even go lower, but on PC you can get like a constant 144 or even higher if you have a better PC, which obviously just makes the game run a lot smoother. And that may not sound like quite a big deal, like the game just running smoother or whatever, but it really does. Like it even comes down to your aim. Like your aim just feels a lot better because the movements just feel so much smoother. So there was a ton of people who used to play console that use controller now on PC that made it. I'm just gonna ballpark and guess because I didn't count exactly how many made it, but I want to say at least like 10 made it into day 2, the final, so like 10%, but only one was actually playing on a console, and that was a guy named Wiggs who plays on Xbox One. So I just wanted to give a quick introduction to this video and explain to you guys that if you can play on PC, even if you use a controller, you're going to be able to play a lot better. These settings will work a lot more efficiently for you, but technically it is not impossible still if you play on console to actually compete with the best players on the game, because a guy named Wiggs who plays on Xbox One actually was able to make it into the finals and everything. So big shout out to him for representing all the console players. And what I want to do for this video is go through a bunch of the best controller players and kind of show you guys their settings, and then tell you guys what also I think are the best settings for people to use. So let's start off with Wiggs, the Xbox player that actually qualified. He uses a 0.7x and a 0.6y, which is actually kind of on the lower side in my opinion. I've always said that you needed to use at least like a 0.6 to like be able to compete with the best. And you know, they kind of changed that with adding the controller building sensitivity, which makes it so you can play on a slightly lower sensitivity while still being able to build fast and compete that way. And I think you guys are going to be surprised on actually how low of sensitivity some of these players play on that I'm going to go through right here. He also uses a 0.37 targeting sensitivity and a 0.72 scope sensitivity, which is really weird for me. I don't know. That seems like a really high scope sensitivity. It's hard to aim with an analog stick with the scope in my opinion, because there is no aim assist with the scope. So that high of a scope sensitivity seems like a lot, but hey, he qualified, so I'm not going to judge him too hard on it. For this controller building sensitivity, he uses 1.6, so I'm guessing it's a little bit on the higher side to make up for a slightly lower X. I mean, obviously it's not super low, but he has a little bit higher than what I do personally. Next, we're going to take a look at the controller player that placed the highest in the NA division. So a guy named Slobbings actually placed 9th, and that was the highest out of any controller player, like I just said. So yes, he even beat out Aiden. He actually killed Aiden in a couple of the games, I think. And he plays on PC, so keep that in mind too. The sensitivity is a little different on PC than console in my experience. It actually feels a little bit slower on PC, even though it's technically the same settings. It does feel a little bit slower. I don't know why. And he actually plays on really close settings to Wiggs. He plays on a 0.75x, which is just slightly higher, and a 0.6y. So it really seems with the addition of this building sensitivity that people are lowering their sensitivities just a little bit to have a little bit more accurate of a shot, more consistent shot. For his ADS and scope sensitivities, he uses both 0.5 on those, which is more in the ballpark of what I'm used to personally. I use a 0.55, but after looking at some of these other controller player settings, I might have to lower mine. And his building sensitivity is 1.5, which is kind of like in the ballpark of what I think is best too. I use a 1.45, but then again, I use a 0.8x. So our building sensitivities are probably pretty equal. And even though Aiden didn't place like too high in the finals of the Winter Royale, I still gotta give him an honorable mention. He did place, or he didn't qualify for the finals, so obviously he's still really consistent. He's definitely got some of the best aim, and obviously he's really good at playground too. So still consider him one of the best, if not the best controller player there. And he actually plays on a 0.75x and a 0.6y as well. And he also uses a 0.50 targeting and a 0.50 scope. So I think I'm honestly gonna switch to 0.50 because that just seems to be what the best is. And honestly, I'm debating on lowering my sensitivity too, because obviously these guys are doing it the best and obviously they know something. He only plays on a 1.30 controller building sensitivity, which I think is a little bit lower than what most people might expect, especially because he's so good at like playground build fights and just build fights in general. So the fact that he doesn't play on super high is kind of surprising to me, but that just kind of shows that it doesn't necessarily mean you need to build like, or you need to turn super fast, but it's more of how you control your builds and how clean they are. So next up, I'm going to take a look at two of the top EU controller players that have placed super consistently over almost all of the events. I don't know if they qualified for the summer skirmish, but I'm pretty sure they were both in the fall skirmish, and they both placed in the top 15 for this past Winter Royale event. So the first one is Ghost Issa, who I think placed 4th in the Winter Royale. I could be wrong about that, but somewhere pretty high up. So like he placed really, really well. Definitely had the capability of even winning it. He plays on a 0.76x and a 0.70y. So as you guys can see, we're kind of getting a little bit of a trend here. There is nobody that goes like to 0.8, which I play on normally. So that honestly means I might have to go down. And if you guys are playing higher than 0.75x, I think that you need to go down to 0.75. That seems to be the sweet spot right there. And then he plays on a 0.40 ADS and targeting sensitivity, but he plays on a 1.6 building sensitivity, which is pretty high. So I can imagine his builds are probably super duper fast, but he is able to control them even with the controller. So big shout out to him. A lot of people consider this guy, Issa, he's from the EU, I think he's German, the best controller player overall, even in the world, even better than people in NA. And he's shown it through his placements in these big events. Next person we're going to look at is also from the EU, and he placed 14th in this past Winter Royale event. And he plays on the highest sensitivity of all the controller players we've taken a look at so far. He plays on a 0.77 both X and Y, so that's the highest that we've seen. And he plays on a 0.40 targeting and a 0.50 scoped, as well with a 1.6 building sensitivity. So this dude is probably absolutely cracked when it comes to building. Real quick, I'm going to go through what my settings are and then all the other settings way down below that I couldn't see from the other people's. But right now, I play on PS4 Pro. I'm thinking about making the switch to PC soon, but this is what I'm running. I use a 0.8.8 on X and Y and 0.55 scope, and then a 1.46 building sensitivity. So I haven't changed my settings for a little bit, and this is what pretty much all the top players were using at the time, but I'm thinking about changing it here pretty soon to match what the other best console players have. The scale of the HUD you definitely want to turn down if you haven't already. It doesn't need to be at 1. I've seen people use 0.7, 0.6. Obviously still want to be able to see it a little bit, but definitely turn that down if you haven't. I know a lot of the top like PC pros use sprint by default. I can never get used to it. So if you can get used to it, I think it's better because that way it's just one less button you always have to press. You're gonna be sprinting most of the time anyway. So if you can get used to sprint by default, I would say keep it on because it's a little bit better than having it off, but it's not that big of a difference. Tap to search interact. This is a big one you want on if you haven't already. That way you just have to press the button instead of holding it. Reset building choice. And with Builder Pro, it doesn't really matter. But the main reason you want it on is because it's always going to go back to your wall. And if you have to pull out your build really quickly and build a wall to protect yourself, this is the best way to do it. That way your wall will be built as fast as possible. Obviously, you want aim assist on. I mean, there's no reason to have it off. Edit mode aim assist you want off so you can edit stuff freely, without it dragging wherever it wants to. Turbo building, obviously you want on. Auto material change, obviously you want on. Controller auto run I just use as kind of a quality of life thing. That way I can just, you know, don't have to hold sprint the entire time. I can kind of just leave it on there. So for some people, you know, they actually turn it on sometimes and it screws them up. But for me, it's just a quality of life thing. Doesn't really matter if you have it on or off. Allow cross-platform parties. Obviously, you know, it depends if you're playing with people from other platforms, but I would assume you'd want it on. On open doors, I have off because if there's somebody in the same building as me, I don't want to accidentally open a door and allow them to shoot me or something like that. So I keep that off. Auto pickup weapons is one I actually turned on recently, and that's another like quality of life type thing. And also, I think this potentially could help you when you're first landing on a weapon. I think you're more likely to pick it up than somebody who doesn't have it on, but I don't know for 100% fact. But I like to have it on just in case, you know, sometimes I feel like when I press square to pick stuff up, it just doesn't pick up. So I like to have it on just in case for whatever reason my square isn't working. Auto sort consumables to the right kind of just makes it organizing stuff a little bit easier for you. Builder Pro, build immediately. If you don't have this on, you're doing it all wrong. So make sure you have this on if you don't. Controller edit hold time. I mean, I have just instant edits, so this doesn't really affect me, but I would lower it down a little bit, and nothing lower than 0.10 or whatever though. And now for the next big thing is the custom controller binds, which will make a huge difference in your game in my opinion, and really allow you to get as close to PC as possible. And a scuff controller is undoubtedly going to help you do that as best as possible, just because, you know, if you're using a regular controller right now, the back of your controller literally has nothing on it, but you have all these fingers back there that could be used to be pressing buttons, yet they're just useless right now. So scuffs have buttons on the back, as you guys can see here, that allow you to take advantage of using those extra fingers on the back of your controller, and basically makes it so you don't have to take your thumbs off the analog sticks to stop aiming or something to press one of the other buttons, whether it be X, square, triangle, or circle. Obviously the most important ones are for jumping and switching from build mode, because those are two really big things that you don't want to have to stop aiming to be able to use. So right now you can get up to 4 paddles on a controller, but I'm only taking advantage of 3. I want to start using 4. I'm just not sure what I want to use the 4th for yet. But basically right now I have 1 for jump, obviously, 1 for switch mode, and 1 for edit. And I've actually bound switch modes to the right D-pad, because usually I think that's like use squad comms or something useless like that. So that's basically an unused button that I can just bind to the back of my controller. I never have to take my thumbs off the analog sticks to use any of those things. For my 4th paddle, I'm thinking about doing it to square to pick stuff up and to open doors and stuff like that, and then possibly on build mode bind it to something else or something like that. But as you guys can see, switch mode on the right D-pad, which is bound to a paddle, is super convenient and allows me to have circle as edit, but basically there is no hold time for my edit button. You just literally press circle into instant edit. And I have another paddle on the back which is bound to circle, so basically I don't have to take my thumb off the right analog stick to go to circle. I just have to press a paddle on the back of my controller, so I can switch modes and edit instantly without anything. And obviously I have X's jump still, which is on another paddle. So for the combat controls, those are the main differences compared to just standard Builder Pro or whatever. And then for the build controls, I've changed a little bit since our last video. I've actually decided to use the right joystick, or R3, to use the traps instead of square, because using square I'd have to take my thumb off to actually place traps. And sometimes, you know, when you're in a box or something, maybe not all the walls are yours, and if you're trying to box somebody or something like that, you need to be able to spin and use the trap at the same time. So R3 allows me to do that. And instead of left D-pad to change my trap in case, you know, I don't have my traps out, if I have a campfire or something like that, I actually have the touchpad, since it's kind of right near your thumb anyway, so it's a lot easier to use that than to take your thumb completely off the left analog stick to press the left D-pad. And instead I can kind of use my analog stick and press the touchpad at the same time. So those are the main differences for the build controls. And finally, for the edit controls, I just have a couple slight changes. I know reset is technically right D-pad, so you don't have to take your thumb off the analog stick to use that, but I actually changed it to L2 just because it feels a little bit more comfortable, because I think pressing L2, which is my fingers just rest on naturally, instead of clicking on the right thumbstick, is a little bit easier and just feels more natural for me personally. So it doesn't make a huge deal, obviously, but it's just a little bit more comfortable for me. And I also unbind the squad comms while I'm in edit, because sometimes I don't know if I'm accidentally pressing it or something like that, but sometimes I'll be using squad comms in the middle of my edits, so I decided to just unbind it because obviously I'm not going to use it anyway. But yeah, that pretty much does it for all my custom binds. I'll just go scroll through them real quick here. A scuff controller definitely makes a huge difference for me personally. I think it can make a huge difference for anybody. Like personally for me, I've said this a million times, I would rather not play the game at all than have to play without a scuff. So for me, I feel like I'm just a whole different player with it. And if you are able to drop the money on it, I would definitely suggest, especially if you play a lot, it's definitely worth it, because if you're using a controller a ton, you know, it's definitely worth the investment, especially if you're trying to take it somewhat serious, you're trying to be the best or whatever. I would definitely suggest trying it out. Doom is sponsored by them, so if you use code Doom, you can save 5% on your purchase, which is a little bit of a discount, so you might as well take advantage of it if you decide to buy one. But that's going to do it for the video, guys. Hopefully these settings can help you become a better Fortnite player, because honestly, there are so many settings in Fortnite that they do actually mean a lot in my opinion, and the meta is always changing. You never know what becomes the best and stuff like that. So hopefully this video is able to help you out. Comment down below what platform you guys play on. Drop a like on the video if you learned something new or you think this could help somebody. Would appreciate it a lot, and I'll see you guys soon in the next video. All right, peace out.